What's up, amigos? Today we're going to go over some BCS events and go over some deck lists that are also very interesting that are definitely worth pointing out. So let's get right into it. Check out Dueling Guard's deck boxes, playmats, and binders. The great quality products that are anime based. They continually have more anime options becoming available. Use the affiliated link in the description for a 5% discount on your next purchase. So we're covering 3 BCSs. So we're starting off with BCS Myanmar. And so as we can see with top 4, we have Blau. This is all premium, by the way. Highlander, Night Rose, and then Eugene. And so as you can see, Blau and Eugene are interesting decks that we don't see as often too. So we're definitely going to dive into those too. But also mention like the rest of top 8, we see a lot of diversity. In fact, we see 2 OTTs, but they're like Battle Sisters and also like Tsukiyomi. So like they're different technically. We have Rising Nova, Night Rose, Murakumo, which is the Yasui. So that's really cool to see that it's finally like topped or something. I haven't seen this top recently, so I'm excited for that too. What's also interesting is that we've been typically seeing like Chaos Breaker, Mega Connolly, Murakami, those types of decks, but none of them are present in here. So that's pretty cool. But let's dive into some of the deck lists, right? And so we have Blau. So what's interesting about this kind of deck is that it's able to like essentially rewrite cards to have more Vanguard attacks essentially. And not only that, but they have like strides that help with that too. And as you can see, it forces like the grade 3 to right on top of it too. So you could have multiple Vanguard attacks, but you also have access to cards like Favorite Chant Victor, the Merciless Stride. And so it just hits hard. So it's not only just restanding your riggers that you have, but it's definitely Vanguard focused to help with that too. And then going into the Eugene list. And so for those that don't know, Eugene, you really use it for the name. And so once you stride into this guy, for example, you'll get power, you'll get a drive, and you'll get crit. And then at this point, you're like, okay, so what? And then if you've played standard, you remember this guy, Oswald. So your stride does get the name too. And essentially you have a restanding stride that has like the quad check first, and then eventually it'll go down to the drive 2-1 at that point. And we have stand triggers in premium too. So if you so happen to drive check the stand trigger, you can restand this guy and then do it again. It is not a once per turn too. So as you can see, it can be very scary when you have a high power crit Vanguard, especially with the first couple checks being a good number of them, and then just being able to like, wow, you know, apply that pressure. They're also playing interesting cards like Blazing Flare Dragon, where essentially if you pull it off, you'll take off a bunch of the markers and circles and protects from their hand. So it can pay off as well. Kudos to the premium players that top to this event. Moving on to V Premium, and so in the top 4, we see Night Rose, Jewel Knight, Highlander, and Leopold Reverse. And so these are typically decks that we do expect to top, and you know, Night Rose has been buffed recently with the promo, which I'll cover in that list as well. And as we can see with the rest of top 8, we see MLB, we see Sanctuary Guard, which is, I haven't seen that in a while, Fenrir, Gurguet, and so a lot of diversity still. And so with V, we're also going to expect more diversity too, but we have seen a lot more Night Roses tops, mainly because of the promo. And so you're probably asking, which promo is that? And it's this gal. So she extends attacks, but not only that, it helps with the consistency of discarding itself. Check the top 5. And it's gray and blue, so discarding itself also just helps fuel for it, which is funny. But you got phenomenal cards that you want to search. So this guy decided to play Sea Strolling Banshee, so that would be your grade 1 ideal target ride. You also have access to Skeleton Sea Navigator to mill. You got cards like Greed Shade to fix your hand whenever it needs to be, and of course you can get your Night Roses before you get to grade 3 as well. So the deck's very consistent, and as you can see, he's playing a high amount of crit, only 2 draws. Skull Dragons with crits is scary, and also Ghost Ship to pair along with it. I'm surprised to see 2 Skull Dragons though. I would feel safer with 3, because if one gets in the damage zone, then you only have 1 to work with. But if they felt like pretty confident in it, then it worked out for them. Obviously they won first. Going into standard, and so we see Dragonic Overlord, Bastion, Gandiva, and Ominuro. I mispronounced that. Forgive me on that. But it's cool to see a fan favorite Dragonic Overlord top as first in this event too. Now this is interesting with standard. Usually like the past BCSs, especially before set 12 release, we saw a lot of dominance with Gandiva and Willista, as we can see that it's more dividing out. But these are interesting because there's like Graham Grace and Bosvarga in the mix. I haven't seen those in a while. The Magalosuchi, if that's how you pronounce it. And also the Chrono Jack deck showing representation stuff, which is something that you would expect still. Going into the Dragonic Overlord list, we see that it has gotten support over time with such as like this card, for example, is that you can retire this unit and put an Overlord card from the drop into the soul. And that's imperative because you have the first skill of this guy where essentially that the unit's drive checks cannot decrease from this effect if you have one in soul. And that's another reason why they play multiple copies of the Dragonic Overlord card in the main deck. Furthermore, they have a phenomenal card that counts as 2 as the pitch, but it also revives itself as a booster too. And if you pair it up with crits and fronts, and of course the Dragon Empire OT, GG. Now moving on to Spain, and so we have for premium, we have Katrina, Rising Nova, Shiranui, and then the mill type of deck. The rest of the top 8, we see Chaos Breaker, as mentioned in the prior BCS, that this is something that we would expect, definitely in top 8 for sure. And it was 3 of them actually, which is pretty cool. And then the rest of top 8 that wasn't in the top 4 was Steam Maiden. So going into the Katrina deck, it's really an Asha deck too, actually. So you can actually use the old Asha to get access to the history collection stride, so that way you can stride if you're going first. What's interesting though, I noticed that they were playing the damage inflictor. So these are types of cards that essentially you could give yourself damage, and at the end of the turn, you could choose any of your cards in your damage zone and put it back to your deck and shuffle it. So essentially, it's like giving yourself temporary damage. Now, typically, they're used for decks that are essentially like trying to get to a certain amount of damage, such as 4 or more. Good examples are Raging Form, Spectral Duke Diablo, or Spectral Duke with 4 and 5 damage, and things of like that. However, I was trying to look through the deck, and nothing really pops off when you have a certain damage. However, when you look into the damage, into the G zone, we notice that there's 2 copies of Megaloma. Wow, that's size. There we go. This card essentially triggers during the next turn, which is your opponent's turn, that if you were to lose, then you shuffle your hand, your damage back, and then put the top 5 cards into the damage zone, and then you immediately end the turn. Now, this card isn't used often. However, they were running 2 as well. So I was like, okay, so there's some kind of synergy there. And then I remembered there's Rain Breath. Rain Breath actually calls a card from your hand to Rigard Circle when you G-Guard. And guess what? These don't care if it's during your turn or not. Which is pretty nutty. I was like, wait, you can just end the turn that way. If you have this card in hand, you G-Guard, and it's like, I'm just going to end the turn. Which is pretty cool interaction. So I'm curious how their game plan worked out. If they were like, this is like a last pitch effort, essentially. You also have Invierno, for example, that can return cards. So if you need to like return stuff, you can. So I'm curious like how this worked out too. But it obviously won first place. Switching to V Premium, we see Favas, Gargoyd, Night Rose, and Anj. The rest of top 8, we see more Aquaforce, we see Joe Knights, we see Vanquisher, and Night Rose. And so for the deck list, for Favas, that won first, we see the 3 Lambroses. They're playing the 1 Genovias. This is a finisher, like I mentioned, if you ride up as the second grade 3 turn or the turn 4. And you have 4 more damage. You have essentially 3 Excel circles, which means 11 attacks. Much more than Lambros would provide at that point. So it helps seal the deal. We expect cards like Pursuit Assaults. We have Coral Assaults. We have Dennis and the promo. This is super helpful. Makes it much more consistent, and it's another restander. And then of course Narissa and Nikki as well. And they're playing a crit 4 draw. Nice, very solid list. Going into standard, we see PBO, Minerva, Great Mascus, and then the Maradu Mascus as well. So for the rest of top 8, we see another Minerva, we see Willista, Zorga, and the Cloud9, actually. Interesting. But we're going to dive into the first place list with PBO. And if you guys haven't seen this deck in a while, this deck has gotten buffs over time. And so obviously we have the Cyclers. We also have the cards that are like Emmeline, for example. We've seen this with MLB, but this also works with PBO because it looks for Blaster, which means you're looking for your Blaster Darks. They're also playing 2 copies, one in the right deck and one in the main deck as well. There's also this card that enables essentially the Blaster Dark to have drive checks too. And then it also costs as if it were retired as 2 units too, so it helps with advantage too. So very solid support. I noticed that they're also playing beaters, so this card is really fun because if there's no other units in this column, it's an 18k beater, and then you have your draw engine with Skull Witch in the main. Last BCS Vietnam, and so for premium we see Flagberg Colony, or flag colony, how you want to call it. We have Murakami, we have Shiranui, and then we have witches too. The rest of the top 8, we see another Flagberg type of colony, and then we see another Murakami, we see Night Rose, and then we see, I guess, a more pure Gridora Dark Face based deck too as well. Going into the first place flag colony, we see 4 copies of Flagberg, which you expect. You also want to take advantage of the name, but also like Persona Right too. Cards like Inlet are valuable, especially since they're grade 3. The Gridora of grade 4 actually is able to call it out if you need to when it attacks too, because it's a grade 3. You have Usurp, so this is recurring like fodder if you need to, and also just like a body to be able to attack, so you can get like 4 or 5 attacks if you need to easily. Looks like they have a finisher with Antlion too whenever they're ready to pop off with that guy. And then of course Hell Demise, it restands another rear guard, so you have like 5 attacks in total at least, because that doesn't include Tyranid Arix. And so because your Vanguard has Flagberg in the name, this can restand at the end of the second battle, which is pretty easy to accomplish. What's cool about this is that it uses Assault instead of the Counterblast, such as like Ascendance Assault. So if you're managing your resources right, you can still do the things that you need to do for this deck without getting resource hungry. You also have great cards like Sweet Cocktail. You have the Brilliant Blister too. They're playing both the 3-1 ratio. And they're also playing the Area Stealer, so if you time it right with the markers, like you can generate your own imaginary protect markers, because you are on stoicheia Vanguards, which don't have gifts. And so just like having still access to like a protect 1 gift, it's going to be super helpful. I mean, they're still playing PGs, they're playing 3 PGs and then the Sanctitude, so it's not the end of the world, but just having extra protects helps. Plus this can come up like the Nubatama matchup, so if they have a Rin coming out, you could at least have a marker to discard to make that Rin very weekend. Going into V Premium, and like holy crap, we see 3 Ange and 1 Chrono Jet. And it wasn't enough. There was actually a 4th Ange. So literally half of top 8 was Ange. We also have the Murakami. We have Spectral Duke. And then we have Malkov, which is the deck that I definitely want to go into. So I have faced this deck before at a BRL event too. And it's a lot more intricate than you would think. And essentially, you have a Malkov Vanguard. But as soon as this guy was revealed for a damage tag, you have the option to discard a card from your hand and write this as stand. So essentially you're able to generate another protect marker, and this deck wants to do protect too. And so it's really cool because you're able to like use cards like Amputation Angel, that as long as you have a protect marker in the same column as this unit, this also gets 15k. So you have a fat beater essentially. Not only that, but if you have 3 or more protect markers on the circles, like in total, your opponent cannot call Sentinels from hand when this unit attack, of course. So this is like really hard to stop. And there are other cards that gain more effects too. So like this card, for example, if there's a protect marker, this gets intercept, and then when this intercepts, it gets plus 5k until the end of the battle, and it can intercept from the back row. So protect 2 also gives you 10k power for the shield as well. So you have fat shields that you can easily intercept with without losing too much in hand. They also have their V promo that they can consistently get the pieces to as they're writing up if they really want to, but it also can grab a card from the damage zone so they can get combo pieces easily if they need to during the battle phase as well. Oh, forgot to mention that when you have this card as your Vanguard too, it has, when you have 2 or more protect markers, all of the front row gets 10k, which is easy to do because you just write the other one and then use the skill to write over, and boom, 2 markers at that point. And the last one is that all your units with protect markers cannot be retired by players' card effects. So you protect your units from retirement effects too. So it's a lot harder to get rid of essentially. And then lastly, for the standard format, we see 2 Gandiva, we see 2 Orphis Mascus. And for the rest of the top 8, we see literally the rest of the decks like Chrono Jet, Minerva, Ava, and then of course Greed and Mascus as well. Decks that we actually would expect in the top 8. So I think this is a really good representation of what to expect into a top 8. Especially for preparation for an event for yourself too. So diving into the Mascus, Orphis Mascus deck that got 3rd. So on attack, you're able to generate the Shadow Army tokens, but also the Mascus does the same thing, but it also does it in a different way, where the other one's dependent on how many orders you have in the order zone. This is how many you remove them into the drop. And then of course you're able to get an additional drive check, so you have like triple drive, which is like more pressure to you. Which is great, but obviously you want to do like a Mask of Hydrogam effect, so you get to take advantage of Persona Ride if you're going second, super helpful, and then you keep persona writing so your attacks are like hurting still. So pretty fun deck overall. And that's it for today's video. And so as we can see, kind of see the results and observations from it, we see still diversity with premium with V as well. And then with standard, we're starting to see more of a solidified shifting to, I mean, literally back in like early October, and then before it was just like Ballista, Gandiva, maybe a Chrono Jet, maybe a Zorga in there. But we're starting to see a lot more diverse type of standard top 8s. Which is really cool at that point. I am excited to see how set 13 changes things here in the English one soon enough once we get that as well. What are you guys' thoughts? Did you feel like the decks that I highlighted were pretty interesting, or you thought maybe I should like look into different decks that had top 2? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to see your feedback on it too as well. And if you're still trying to prepare for your BCS coming up, I offer one-on-one coaching. Happy to help out where I can too as well for either formats. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to use the affiliate links with TCG Player, 50 Card Shop, Trading Card Mint, Card Trader Zero. And of course, check out Dueling Guards, playmats, binders, and deck boxes to increase your anime swag. Until the next time, amigos. Bye!